All right, so we now got the character moving side to side. What I want to do now is make it jump. Okay. Now this is going to be a little bit different. So instead of having that, we're getting an axis, which gives us a constant input, and it's a range of value, right? So think about if we were playing, let's say, well, a platformer game, right? We want to be able to, or let's say a racing game. You want to be able to that when you push the axis a little bit, that it moves slow, and then if you push it more, it moves faster and faster until you push it all the way and it moves full speed. Which is good for this kind of movement. But it jumps a little bit different, where you don't want to increase speed and you want to just keep adding speed. We want it to execute once and just do a pop, like just immediately add one bit of force and then kind of go from there. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to get an input of jump, just as I had shown before, where we go to the preferences and you go to the input. Where are you? Or not preferences, I'm sorry. The project settings and then input manager. Let's minimize this. You'll see here's jump. Okay, so we're just going to test for that. And then once we have that, then we're going to go ahead and add the force. So this is also going to be on update. So I'm going to go back to that script, that player controller script. And after this one, and maybe even on this, we'll do this too. We'll just say applies motion, applies, X motion to the player character. Okay, so I just put 2 forward slashes, and that just makes a comment. So it's a good idea to comment your, we'll say jump character. That's what the next bit's going to be. So it's a good idea to comment your code. That way, if you're looking at it later or somebody else is looking at it later, they will know how, they'll know what you will know, or they will know what you were writing. Okay, sometimes it's not especially obvious. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use an if then else statement. So we're going to say if, and then whatever's inside these parentheses is true, it's going to run what is inside these braces. So if what's inside there is true. So what we're going to do is we're going to test whether we hit jump. So we're going to say if input dot get button down, and we're going to test for, capital J, jump. So basically this one, unlike this one, which gives me a value from -1 to +1, this get axis on the horizontal, the get button down will either be a true or false statement. So there's also get button up. But in this case, we want to only happen once when we hit the space bar, and then it will execute. And all we're going to do is inside of this, we will add the, we're going to add a force. So we're going to do the PRB2D, because remember, that's our physics. And instead of adjusting its velocity, because this is a constant thing, right? You're constantly moving left and right. This will be one force that we want to apply. This is actually going to be a method that's inside of the rigid body. So it'll be add force, and the force needs 2 values. It needs a directional component, meaning, up, down, left, right, degrees. And it also needs an amount. So what we're going to do is, before I finish this, let's go ahead and add the semicolon here too. Before I put in what it needs, we're going to go up here and we're going to make another public variable so that we can adjust it. So we'll do a public float, and we're just going to call this one jump strength, GMP STR for strength, and I'm going to give it an initial value of 50 F. Okay, 50 F. So it's F for float, because you can also have decimal numbers, what we call doubles. That's like another type, but just know that's what we're doing. Okay, so 50F, that's going to be our jump strength. So we're going to give it a direction. This is like a shortcut that you can use, because we could literally do a new vector 3 and then give it vector 3, or actually we'll do 2 because it's a 2D game, and then give it an X and a Y, and then we could say 0.5 and 1 if we're doing normalized values. But what would be better is we could just use this shortcut. So we're going to just say vector 2 dot up. So basically apply the force upwards, and then we're going to take that and we're going to multiply it times the jump strength value that we had. So like that. So basically we say if there's a button down on jump, then it's going to run this bit of code and it's going to add the force, and the force amount that it's going to add is, this is the direction and the strength and the amount. And now we'll go back here, save that, Control S, come back here. And here we go. We'll hit play. And tap spacebar. And you can see it's moving a little, but it's not very strong. So I'm going to stop it, and we're going to give it a much larger value. So let's do 200. That might be too much. I don't really know. I was just guesstimating with the 50 there. There we go. So now you can see he's jumping. But the problem is, I can make him fly. So we're going to have to fix that as well. It's also a bit floaty. So I'm going to go ahead and change that as well. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to the edit project settings. I want you to go to the physics 2D, and you'll see it has X and Y, and it has minus 9.8 because it's going downwards. What we're going to do is keep the minus, but we'll do minus, let's say 25. Okay, so minus 25, which means it's going to be a little bit stronger. I'm also on the player here. You'll see the part where is the mass. Let's make that like 10, just so it's a little bit stronger. And let's hit play. Or it's a little bit more mass. Now it's going to need a lot more strength, right? So let's go ahead and add that. So let's try 500. And it's really not doing it now. Let's make this back to 1. Maybe that's the problem. Yeah, that's better. We'll just leave it at 1. Okay. So now you can see we can move and we can jump. And voila. Oh, and we died. We'll have to fix that later. All right, so we're getting pretty close, right? It has most of the things that we want, but one of the things that would be nice is if it would, if I could make it, it's not really a game. I mean, it's not a game for a lot of reasons, but one of the things that kind of stinks is that, I could just keep jumping. It's not very challenging, right? So I want to make it so I can only jump if I'm on the ground. Okay, so that should be pretty easy to apply. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go over here, and after this, so these are going to be my variables that I adjust. We're going to do one right here. I'm going to call it public. Actually, I would normally want this private, but I'm only making it public so we can see it just to know that it's working. And we're going to do a bool. A bool is true or false. So it can either be a true or a false statement. And we're just going to call it ground. And let's give it an initial value of false. Okay, so that it's not on the ground because our player does start off the ground. We're going to say ground is false, and we're gonna change this value whether we're on the ground or not. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use another pre-made function here. Okay, so just like we had this start and this update, we're going to do a new one. We're going to call it void on collision enter 2D because it's 2D, and then we're going to write collision 2D COL. Okay, so what this is, basically on our guy here, right, if you remember, we have this box collider we put on it, right? So what that can do is it can actually detect whether we're colliding with things. And what we're going to do is we have this function that will trigger whenever it collides with something, okay? So right now, so when it collides with this, it has to collide with another object, obviously. That will then trigger. Now, what it's going to do is, you'll see it's a little bit different. Like we always write void, which means when the function runs, it doesn't send anything. It just literally runs the function and that's it. It doesn't return anything. So you notice that all these have been voids thus far. We'll talk about different ones that you might want to use, but in this case, it's just using that. And then this is a special name. It's this specific. But then it actually has these arguments here. Okay, and what that means is that it's going to expect the object a collision, and then it's going to store. In our case, we made this name up for COL. So what we can do is we can then test what we collided against. Okay, so for now, what I'm going to do is we're just going to say that ground. So when this does run, we're going to make ground equal to true. Okay. Now we need to do a two-part thing here. We also need to turn it back off. So inside of jump, actually, you know what? Instead of that, we'll do another one here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do void on collision exit 2D. So when we leave the collision, and it's just the same thing, COL, we're going to make the ground equal to false so that we turn it back off, right? Because if we're leaving it, turn back off. All right, so we have basically two things. When we collide with something, make ground true. When we leave a collision, make it false. Save that, go back here. All right, I'm gonna scroll down here and we can see ground. Now hopefully this should check on. Oh, see it checked on, and when I tap it, see? Like that. Yay. Now that doesn't actually do anything, but you can see our collision is indeed working. Yay. Okay, pretty easy. But what I want to do is only make it so that we can only jump if we are on the ground. So back in our code here, where we have, if we press jump, jump. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to nest another if statement. We're going to say if ground, which is inherently a Boolean, right? So we can say if ground is equal to true. That would be fine. But ground is a Boolean, so we'll say if ground is true, then, and I'm going to take this bit here, then you can jump. So basically, first we say, oh, if the player hits jump, then run what's inside of here. Then it's going to say, okay, if ground is true, then you can apply it. But it's not going to apply it unless ground is also true. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and save that. And then we're going to go back here. And we'll hit play. And now you'll see I can tap spacebar as much as I want, and I can only jump once, which is neato. Yay. Okay, so hopefully that's pretty straightforward. It would be nice to have a couple of other things in here, just as like kind of good housekeeping. One would be nice is if we could do a double jump. So that, because a lot of these platformers, right, they have a second jump, and we don't. So that might be nice to have. So let's go ahead and set that up. So I'm going to go up here, and we're just going to do another bool. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this private, because I don't really actually need to know that it's there. But we'll call it double jump, and we'll set that initially equal to false. And what we're going to do is that after we jump, so let's say we're on the ground, we jump, we're going to say that double jump can be true, meaning that we're going to be allowed to double jump. All right. Now, this is an if statement. You don't have to have one, but you can have one. So we're going to do an else. So what this is for is saying if this is true, if we're on the ground, go ahead and run this. Else, it's going to run what's inside of here. What we're going to do is we're going to say if double jump is true, okay, so because we turned it on here, then you again can jump. And we're just going to go ahead and grab this bit. I'm just going to Control C or Command C if you're on a Mac, and Control V or Command V if you're on a Mac. It's going to add force, blah, blah, blah. And this time, after we do the double jump, we're going to tell it to turn it back off. Okay, so basically, if we're on the ground, it's going to say, yeah, you can jump, and turn it so that double jump can happen. Okay, now let's say we're no longer on the ground, but we did jump once, so that double jump can happen. Well, now this won't be true, so it's going to run what's in here. And it's going to say, oh, can you double jump? And it's going to say, it's currently true, so then it will run this. But let's say we're still off the ground. Let's say we hit jump again. This won't be true, okay? So it'll go here, and then it'll go, okay, can you double jump? Well, it will set false, so now this won't run. So it'll only be able to run one of these at a time. It'll only be able to run one after the other, but it won't be able to run again until it gets set to true again. All right, so we'll save that. We'll go back. Now, there's other ways of like making this a little bit cleaner so it's not redundant, because we kind of copy and pasted code. That's like one of those things you don't want to do. But it allows us that if we did want to, so now you can see if we did want to like make the double jump like a different strength, also it's a little bit easier. So now you can see we can double jump and we can dive, which is great. Okay, so another thing I want to be able to do is basically just set up our start position so that we can, when we fall off the screen, we're able to reset. Because right now, if we play our game and I go off the side, well, one thing actually is this. See how we spin? Probably don't want that. So I'm still on the player. Still on the player here. I'm going to go ahead and go to the rigid body. You'll see a constraints, and we're going to freeze the rotation. And that's just going to make it so that we can't rotate. So you'll see when we play, you won't be able to turn. Yeah. So, well, you can't tell, but that's what it does. Okay. So the other thing I want to do is I want to make it so that when we fall off the screen, that we reset our position here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to set up a start position. So up at the top of our script, we're going to go ahead and over here, we're going to do a, we'll do a, we're actually, we're going to put it right here. So we'll do a private, and it's going to be a vector2, because I want it to hold my XY position, and we're going to call it start POS, or start position, okay? Then what I'm going to do is, we could make this public and then give it a value, so just so you get the idea. So if I made this public, I could go over here, and currently, hang on. So if you scroll down, you'll see that I can give it the 2 vectors, and then we'll use that starting position. Right now, my player is starting at 0, 0, so this would work. But let's say I wanted my player to start over here. Well, every time he dies, he's going to spawn up here. I'd rather he started where we place him. So what we're going to do is we're going to test where the player starts and put that as the position. But I'm just going to make it private because nobody else needs to access this but our guy here. So what we're going to do is on start, we're going to say that start position will be equal to, and it's going to be transform.position. Oh, not like that. Sorry. Transform.position. And what that means is it's going to be our, it's what this object, what this is currently attached to. So if you go over here, I'm always hitting Control S, by the way, when I'm going back and forth. I sometimes forget to tell you guys that, but transform position. So it's going to basically go to the transform, go to position, and it's whatever this script is attached to, and it's attached to this object. So it inherently knows that that's what it is, okay? So it's going to take that as the start position, and we're going to store that on the very first frame. So wherever you currently are on the first frame, this only runs once, and it runs on that first rendered frame. That's what it's going to do. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to set up that when we die, that it will put our player back on this spot. Okay, so we're going to do this. We want to test that at all times, right? So that way we can, because you could die at any moment. So we're just going to go ahead and go like that. And I'm just going to, after the jump part here, we're just going to say reset player after fall. Okay, and we're just going to set up here. So we're going to say if the transform dot position. So if our current position dot y, I only care about the y position. I don't care about the side to side, only my up and down, because I want it that when we fall off at a certain spot, it's going to reset. So I actually don't even know what that value is going to be. So I'm going to grab this. I'm on W for move tool, and I'm just going to put it. I'm like, okay, wherever this is. So if I look, it looks like minus 5.68. So we'll just say minus 6, because I think 5 is still in screen. So we'll just say minus 6. So when we're at minus 6, it's going to reset the position. So if the blah 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 dot y is less than or equal to, and we're going to say minus 6. Okay. So basically, if our current y position is at negative 6 or below it, right? Because it's less than or equal to, we're just literally going to take our position, and we're going to make it equal to the start position. So we're going to make it back equal to the start position. So if we ever go below this, it's going to reset it. This isn't actually the best way to do it, but it will work for what we're doing right now. So we'll save that, go back here, and there we go. So now if I hit play, you'll see if we go off, boop, sets us there. And it always sets us to that starting position. So that's the beauty of it, because instead if I hard coded, meaning like I typed in here, like the start position, right here, like if I gave it a value instead of having it get the value from the start to the very first frame, it would be whatever that value is. And what's nice about the way that we're doing it now is that if I have multiple levels, wherever I put this character, let's say I put him up here, when I die, it's just going to put it there at that start position, which is handy. Doesn't matter where I die, it's always going to do that. So that way it makes it easier for setup purposes. So we're just going to go ahead and put him guess right here, we'll say. Now, there's one other problem that we haven't really dealt with. That it's not really a problem right now, but it might be a problem later. And that is our ground. Okay, so right now we have it that if we hit anything, where is it? So we have it right now that if we hit any collision object, it's going to make ground true. Well, not everything's a ground, right? Like, so let's say I make another object, sprite, and we'll just do, let's say, a triangle. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure it has a box collider. Box collider. Don't do this. I'm just showing you. And let's just make it bigger. Right? So right now, like, that's not really an object I want to be able to jump off of necessarily. But it's going to treat it that way as a ground object. Let's say it's an enemy. I don't want this to happen, right? I want to be able to jump off of it. So what we need to do is we want to make it so we're going to create a tag. We can't do it based off of name, because see how this platform, its name is platform, and then this one's platform 1. I can't do it for every single name. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a tag, and we're going to tag these objects that everything with this tag will treat it a certain way. So I'm going to go to tag, and we're going to add a tag. And then we'll hit plus, and we're going to call this ground, capital G. Okay. And then we can take any element that we want to be considered ground, and we just give it this tag, and that will mean the player can jump off of it. So I'm going to go back to the platform here, and actually I'm going to hold control and click and click. It'll be command, click, click, click. So I grab all 3 of them. I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go ground. Another thing that's handy too, because I have multiple platforms, is if I just put them all in a group. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to create an empty. I'm going to zero it all out, just because I like to have things zeroed out. And then we can take this one, and this one, and I'm going to click and drag and drop them onto this game object. And we'll just call this platforms. So it's all the platforms. And then I could collapse it, and it just makes it a little bit more tidy. Okay. And then when I grab it, I can scale them all together and move them all together, so on and so forth. Okay. So now these all have that ground tag. So now what I can do is I can test whether the thing that we hit was indeed the ground tag. So we're going to go here. Currently, if we hit anything. So we're going to do is we're going to do another if statement. So we're going to say if, and then it's going to be whatever is inside of here is true. It's going to make the ground true. Okay. So what we want to test is that tag. So it's going to be this. It's going to be COL, because that's the collision object. But I don't want that. I can't test. The collision object doesn't have the tag. What has the tag is the game object. So it's going to be COL.game object. And then what we want to do is we want to compare tag. So inside the game object, we're going to run a method called compare tag. And then we just put in the tag name. In this case, it's ground. So if it compares the tag and it is indeed ground, it'll say ground is true. So let's just go ahead and copy this, because we want it for the exit as well. And paste that in here. And then we're just going to go ahead and add our braces. And I'm going to take this, and we're going to put it up there. And voila. Let's close that off. And let's also close that off a little bit. There we go. And we'll save it, and we'll go back. And you probably won't see anything too different, to be honest. But it will just make sure that, like, if we have a tree or something, we can't. I mean, we can make the tree also. But I don't want to make it so it can jump off of anything. So now you can see I can't jump off of this, because now that object is not a ground object. It'll only jump off of objects that have that tag ground applied to it. And I'm going to delete that triangle. It's just there for instructional purposes. I think that was everything I really wanted to cover. Yeah, so we should be pretty good. So you can see we have the basic mechanics, right? I mean, it moves and stuff like you would expect a object to. So I think we're good. All right. So you could play around with the numbers and things as well on our player controller here. And also we could also deal with the physics and things, but we're gonna play around with that a little bit later. But we have the basic mechanic of being able to move and being able to jump. So yeah, there you go.